5 years into my marriage with Paul, something monumental shifted in our lives. We had always seemed like any other couple, me, a teacher, and him, a manager at an energy company. Life flowed smoothly, without any major bumps in the road. But then, everything changed when his father passed away, leaving his mother, Elaine, alone in their enormous, empty family home. It was then that Paul dropped a bombshell on me, his words heavy and uncertain. "Anna, we need to talk," he said one night, his tone uncharacteristically serious. The way he said it made me stop scrolling on my phone and focus, my heart suddenly racing. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach as I looked up at him. "It's about Mom," he began, his voice tinged with concern. "She's alone in that old house since Dad passed. I think we should move in with her." The words hit me like a freight train. I froze, struggling to process what he was saying. "Move in with Elaine?" I echoed, trying to grasp the enormity of it. "Paul, we don't exactly get along with her. You know that." He leaned against the kitchen counter, his eyes unwavering. "I know, but she's my mom, and she's struggling. Plus, we're just throwing away money on this rented apartment." I ran a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. "But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom is a huge change. It's not just about the space, Anna. It's about family. Mom needs us," he pleaded. A bitter taste settled in my mouth, and I couldn't help but ask, "Does your mom need us, or do you need your mom?" "That's not fair," he snapped, his voice softening. "I'm not asking you to live in a dump. It's a huge house. There's plenty of room for all of us." I crossed my arms, my body tense, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "And what about our life here? Just approve everything because Elaine snaps her fingers? It's not like that, and you know it. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone," he said, his words firm. "Everyone, or just Elaine?" I shot back, frustration seeping into my tone. He threw his hands up in exasperation. "Can't you see the bigger picture here, Anna?" "I am seeing the bigger picture, Paul," I responded, my voice tight. "Our life. Our independence. Not just pretending to be a happy family in that gloomy old house of hers." The argument spiraled in circles, neither of us giving in, but eventually, I conceded. For Paul's sake. For the sake of peace. But deep down, a part of me dreaded every second of it. Moving day came, and it was every bit as uncomfortable as I had imagined. Elaine's house loomed before us, an imposing, cold structure with empty, echoing rooms and an unshakable chill in the air. Elaine greeted us with her usual stiff smile. "Welcome to my home," she said curtly, her tone laced with a formality that made my skin crawl. "I expect you to respect my ways." I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. "Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay." Living with Elaine felt like being under constant surveillance. She had something to say about everything. "Don't put the dishes away like that," she chid. "You're overwatering the plants." It was relentless. One night, after another scathing critique about my cooking, I lost it. I exploded to Paul in our room, the frustration pouring out. "I can't do a damn thing right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant." Paul rubbed his temples, his face as frustrated as mine. "Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways." I threw my hands up in the air, exasperated. "Great! So we just tiptoe around her until the end of time?" He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant gaze, and Elaine's critical eyes, was suffocating. Every day felt like a new battle. But then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, the sun filtering through the garden, and I was trying to find some semblance of peace when Paul walked outside, his face grim. "Anna, we need to talk," he said, leaning against the garden gate. I looked up, a knot of dread twisting in my stomach. "What now, Paul?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a deep breath, the weight of his words heavy. I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It just makes more sense. The shock hit me hard. Quit my job? I echoed, my voice rising in disbelief. I love teaching, Paul. It's not just about the money. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice growing more urgent. I know, but think about it. It'll make things easier around here. I shook my head, my disbelief giving way to anger. So what? I just become a full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want. His tone grew firm, almost angry. It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us. I glared at him, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. No! Your mom needs you. I didn't sign up to be her caretaker. Well, things change, Anna. We need to adapt, he said, his voice cutting through me like a knife. That word, adapt, felt like a slap in the face. I love my job. I love my independence. This wasn't adapting. This was sacrificing. I was losing myself bit by bit. You know what, Paul? Fine. I'll do it. But don't expect me to be happy about it, I said, my voice cold with resignation. He sighed in relief, a look of gratitude crossing his face. Thank you, Anna. It means a lot. But the relief didn't settle in me. It felt more like a loss, losing a part of myself. Quitting my job was difficult, but the days that followed were even harder. Now, I was a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine had a critique for everything. Those curtains need a wash, she'd say, or the soup is too salty. It was unending. One day, after she criticized how I folded her clothes, I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here, I snapped, the anger bubbling over. She looked taken aback, surprised by my outburst. Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna, she shot back, her voice cold. I threw the iron down in frustration. I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help, and all you do is criticize me. There was a long, tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened, just a fraction. I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things a certain way, she admitted quietly. From that day on, things improved, just a little. Elaine's criticisms became less frequent, and I tried to accommodate her quirks. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was better than constant battles. Yet, as time passed in Elaine's house, the tension continued to build. The atmosphere grew stifling. Paul's behavior became more distant. He was always late from work, and when he was home, he might as well have been invisible. He retreated into the spare room like it was a sanctuary. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, I confronted him in the kitchen. Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly ever here, and when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore. He avoided my gaze, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress, he muttered. I folded my arms, my voice steady but firm. I get stressed, Paul. But this feels like you're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here. He sighed heavily, still not looking at me. I don't know what you want me to say. I'm just really tied up with stuff. I wanted to believe him, to understand, but something inside me screamed that there was more to it than that. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who seemed determined to add fuel to the fire. Every visit felt like a trial. She'd look around with that sneer of hers, her words cutting. Still stuck in this old dump? I usually bit my tongue, but one day her taunts hit too close to home. Not all of us have the luxury to mooch off others, Lucy, I shot back, my anger flaring. Her laughter grated on my nerves. Oh, look at you, playing the martyr in a haunted house. Pathetic! I clenched my jaw, holding back the torrent of words that begged to escape. Paul, as usual, stood silent. His lack of defense stung, another jab confirming the growing divide between us. But the biggest shift came with Elaine. One day, her voice cracked as she called out to Lucy, her frailty undeniable. Lucy, I need help with a bath. I can't manage on my own anymore. Lucy's response was a cold, dismissive sneer. Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker. Elaine's tears broke something inside me. Despite all the tension, all the years of friction, I couldn't leave her in that state. I helped her with the bath, and something shifted between us that day. Elaine, in her own way, started to warm up to me. She stopped treating me like an intruder and more like a daughter. It was a change I welcomed. But as things improved, it only highlighted the growing chasm between Paul and me. The house had grown colder, emptier, its silence stretching further with each passing day, despite Elaine's newfound warmth toward me. Every corner seemed to echo with a widening chasm between Paul and me, a space that grew deeper with time. His late nights at work became routine, and our conversations, once full of life and laughter, had now been reduced to brief, hollow exchanges. It was during one of these rare moments, a fleeting conversation, when Paul dropped another bombshell, another secret to add to the ever-growing pile. Anna, I got an apartment near work, he said, his voice casual, but the words hit me like a slap in the face. I nearly dropped the dish I was cleaning. An apartment? Why on earth would you need that? I asked, my mind racing. He leaned against the doorframe, avoiding my gaze as if he were ashamed, and explained, it's just practical, Anna. Saves me the commute, especially with the late nights. Anger surged through me, thick and suffocating. Just decided this without talking to me? What are we, roommates now? I demanded, my voice trembling with frustration. His indifference cut deeper than anything else. I thought you'd be happy, less stress about me coming home late, he said dismissively, but I shook my head, disbelief flooding my chest. Happy? Paul, this feels like you're living a double life. What's next? You're going to tell me you have a second family? My words hung in the air, sharp and bitter. He sighed, rubbing his forehead, clearly growing tired of the confrontation. Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that. But even as he said the words, I knew that there was more to the story. A few days later, Elaine revealed the truth during a rare moment of calm between us. You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money, she said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. I looked up, bewildered. What do you mean? I asked, confusion settling over me like a heavy fog. Elaine hesitated, then finally confessed, he used my savings. He said it was an investment, and even put it in my name. My heart sank. He's been using her money? And you're okay with this? I asked, struggling to comprehend what she was saying. Elaine's eyes grew sad, a distant look clouding them as she shrugged. I couldn't say no, Anna. He's my son, but I thought you should know. I was speechless. His secret apartment had been one thing, but this? Using his mother's savings and keeping it from me felt like the deepest betrayal. A few days later, I confronted him. Paul, why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money? I demanded, anger rising in my chest. He was unrepentant, almost defiant. Because I knew you'd react like this, he said, dismissing me. It's an investment, Anna. It's not a big deal. My hands trembled with fury. Not a big deal? You're gambling with your mom's savings, and you keep it from me? What else are you hiding? I watched him turn away, his face a mask of indifference as he waved me off. You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business. The word business struck me like a cold slap. It had become his excuse for everything, for all the cracks in our marriage. Living in Elaine's dreary house was taking its toll on me. The walls, once full of life, now felt oppressive. The creaks of the floorboards, the chill in the air, everything about that place seemed to whisper secrets, to echo with the distance between Paul and me. One day, I couldn't take it any longer. "Elaine, have you ever thought about renovating the house?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "It could use a little freshening up." Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. "Renovate? Family, how can you say that?" I felt my voice tremble with disbelief. "It could really use it, Elaine." Paul, sitting nearby, simply shrugged, his indifference cutting through me like a knife. "Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top." My stomach turned. "Burden? She's not a burden, Paul. She's family." I shot back, my voice shaking with emotion. But he didn't even look at me. His eyes were distant, his tone colder than I could ever have imagined. "Anna, I can't deal with this," he said, the words slicing through me. "I have enough on my plate." I was stunned. "You can't deal with this? She's your mother." I reminded him, but my voice was barely a whisper. His shrug was the final blow. "Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top." How could he be so callous? How could he turn his back on his own mother like that? But as much as his words hurt, they also made something clear. The gap between us wasn't just widening, it was becoming a vast, impassable chasm. The days that followed blurred into one long stretch of hospital visits, consultations with doctors, and making arrangements for Elaine's care. Paul, however, remained distant, consumed by his own stress, unwilling to help. It was a difficult time, but I couldn't abandon Elaine. Not when she needed me most. So, I threw myself into caring for her, spending long hours at her bedside, holding her hand, offering whatever comfort I could. But even as I focused on Elaine's needs, the feeling of betrayal gnawed at me. How could Paul turn his back on his own mother? And what did that say about our relationship? The answers to those questions began to surface in the days and weeks that followed. Elaine's condition deteriorated, and the strain on our marriage became impossible to ignore. Paul's indifference transformed into something darker, resentment, and our once solid foundation began to crumble beneath us. It was clear that we had both changed, that the people we once were now just distant memories. And as I sat by Elaine's bedside, watching over her in her final days, I couldn't help but wonder what had become of the love that had once bound us together. "She's family. She needs us," I insisted, hoping to appeal to Paul's sense of duty. But his laugh was bitter, devoid of empathy. "No, Anna. She needs you. I've got other things to handle," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. And just like that, I was left speechless, the weight of his indifference crushing me. As I took on the responsibility of caring for Elaine, Paul's visits became rarer. When he did come, they were brief, his conversations with her superficial. Then came Lucy. I overheard them in the living room. Her words, venomous and sharp. "We should start thinking about the will, dividing the assets," Lucy said coldly. I stormed into the room, fury burning through my veins. How could they talk about dividing her things when she was still alive? "Can you really be this heartless?" I demanded, the words stabbing the air. Lucy's smirk was sharp enough to cut, her response colder than I could have imagined. "Oh, look who's talking, the saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's matter, stay out of it." I felt the fury well up in me, but it was Paul's voice that rang through the room, its bitter edge unmistakable. "Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan these things. No use pretending she's going to bounce back." His tone was cruel, dismissive, and it sent a chill down my spine. I was speechless, my heart aching with disbelief. "Practical? She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so callous?" I protested, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. But his response was a mere shrug, his detachment as sharp as a knife. "Life's callous, Anna. Better get used to it," he said, his words cutting deep. The cruelty of it all burned through me. I turned away, my heart heavy with disgust. The weeks that followed felt like a blur, the sharp sting of betrayal never far from my mind. But despite everything, I gave my all to Elaine's recovery. To my astonishment, she showed signs of improvement. It felt like a miracle. But to Paul and Lucy? It was nothing more than an inconvenience, a hurdle in their path to inheritance. Their indifference stung deeper than any words could. Life settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a constant roller coaster, victories small but fragile, overshadowed by the fear of the worst. And then, one day, it came. Another stroke, more severe this time. The call from the hospital hit me like a punch to the gut. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood beside the grave, my heart heavy as friends and family came to pay their respects. And that's when he arrived. Paul, with a woman I didn't recognize, and 2 small children clinging to her. "Who's she?" I whispered to myself, my eyes glued to the unfamiliar woman. Paul's voice sliced through the tension. "Anna, this is Carol, my wife, and these are our kids." I felt as though I had been slapped. "Your wife? When did this happen?" My voice trembled with shock. He shrugged, the coldness in his voice cutting through me like ice. "A while ago." "It's none of your business, Anna." I stood there, unable to comprehend the betrayal. How could he do this, during all this time with Elaine? Lucy, standing by his side, finally showed her true colors. "Finally showing your true colors, Anna." "It's a bit late for that," she taunted, her words dripping with venom. I glared at her, my voice low but filled with contempt. "I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her. Don't you dare judge me." Paul, eager to end the confrontation, intervened, his voice cold and final. "Let's just get this over with. We have other matters to discuss." And just like that, they turned away, leaving me in the midst of the storm that had only just begun to unravel. After the funeral, the gathering moved to Elaine's house for the reading of the will. Paul and Lucy were like vultures, their eyes glinting with greed. The lawyer began reading the will, but when the bombshell dropped, everything changed. Everything. The house, the money. All of it is left to Anna. Paul's face drained of color, his smug expression turning to one of shock. "What the hell? This can't be right." Lucy was seething, her voice shrill with anger. "She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody?" I stood there, stunned, not knowing whether to feel joy or sorrow. Vindicated, but hollow. I had done nothing to deserve this except care for her when no one else would. Paul turned to me, his voice dripping with accusation. "You manipulated her, didn't you? Turned her against us." I shook my head, the mix of disbelief and anger swirling inside me. "I did nothing but care for her, which is more than I can say for you." The lawyer interjected, trying to restore order. Elaine was very clear in her will. Lucy, now beyond fury, hissed, "This is not the end. We'll contest this. There's no way we're letting her get away with this." As they stormed out, their threats seemed hollow. I was left alone in the house that was now legally mine, the walls that had witnessed so much pain, betrayal, and love. I sat there, holding the will in my hands, trying to process it all. Elaine had left it all to me, and Paul and Lucy were furious. They came back the next day, their anger palpable. "You really think you can just take everything?" Paul burst out as soon as he stepped into the house. I didn't flinch. Elaine decided this, Paul. It was her choice. Lucy was red in the face, yelling, "You tricked a sick old lady. We won't let you get away with this." I stood up, no longer willing to tolerate their nonsense. Tricked? I was there for her, unlike you two. She chose to leave it to me. Paul's fury was palpable, his words thick with venom. "So you think you beat us? You think you can just snatch everything away?" I sighed heavily, the weight of the truth settling in. "I didn't snatch anything, Paul. Elaine gave it to me because she knew I actually cared. Their yelling faded into the background, just noise against the reality I had lived. I had been there for Elaine when they weren't. Then, the lawyer arrived, holding a video that Elaine had made. Her voice filled the room, crystal clear, as she said it, right there in front of everyone. I left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there when my own kids weren't. She deserves it all. The room fell silent. Paul looked like he'd been punched in the gut, and Lucy, finally realizing the weight of what they'd done, started crying. After that, Paul and Lucy left. Their threats, their anger, all fell flat. I was left alone in the house, surrounded by the echoes of the past and the heavy weight of the future. I knew what I had to do. I filed for divorce. It was tough, but it was the only choice. Paul and his new family had to move to a rental place, while Lucy dealt with her own mess of debts and bad decisions. As for me, I stood in my new house, feeling both sadness and a strange excitement. Elaine's will wasn't just about the house or the money. It was as though she was telling me to be strong, to find my own way. This house, once a symbol of hardship, would now be a place for new beginnings.